Hello everyone. Welcome. Today we're gonna be doing some art practice and doing YouTube reactions. Anyway, so yeah, this one just still continuing on our to finish this up, and hopefully I'll be able to get it done by the end of the month. By the end of the month, because I'm just taking as much time as I can, for as much time as possible. And I hope y'all are eating well and remember to hydrate and please. And let's get right into this. Nostalgia.
What is this? I mean, yeah, it's the sound of the greatest villain in movie history, at least in my opinion. But like, that's not a thing. Villain sounds, most villains don't have sounds. What even is that phenomenon? And what is the sound communicating? Why does it need to be here? What is it
Yes,
contributing
it
to?
needs to
What
be here
whole character is
because
this
it
a
is.
component of? And what does that component do for this whole? And what does a component of this type do that something like a catchphrase or another attribute doesn't do? And obviously, this isn't a video about like the sound of Vader's asthma or whatever. I want to understand the greatest villain in movie history, or at least advance my understanding of him. This is one of my favorite characters of all time, one of the most brilliantly executed character arcs
Mm-hmm.
of all time, and that arc is the backbone of possibly the greatest franchise of all time. So there's a lot to talk about here, but I do want to start very, very simply with the breathing. It is so iconic, but what is it? And the reason why I'm starting here is not just, oh, quirky, interesting place to start the video. No, this is where Star Wars itself starts. I think a lot of people forget about this, but Vader's first scene has no dialogue whatsoever. He's actually barely doing anything in the scene. He walks in, the music swells, and then it gets quiet, and then we just hear the breathing. That is the focal point
Yeah,
of the first scene of the greatest
exactly.
villain of all time. So this is important. Clearly, this is a cornerstone of the villain experience Star Wars wants to build with this character. So yeah, we gotta understand this. So let's just take a moment and listen. It's actually insane how much you can get from just this noise. Probably the first thing you're noticing is the pace. It's slow and it's measured. And for a character like this, that is significant. Vader is a deadly character. I think it's easy to forget because this role of his gets overshadowed big time by the other two movies and all of his iconic
Yep.
scenes and his arc. But if our vantage point is A New Hope, Vader kills or oversees the killing of so many people. He kills Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, he kills Obi-Wan, he kills all the rebels, he kills all the Jawas, he kills Luke's friends, he tortures Leia, he almost kills Luke, he chokes this guy, and that's just episode 4. He kills more people later, he freezes Han, he mutilates Luke, he kills the Emperor. Rewind, he kills all the Sand People, he kills Dooku, he kills the younglings, he kills the whole Jedi Order, he kills his wife. For a character who is this deadly, this violent, the way he breathes is just terrifying. This is not just a flailing ball of wild, violent energy, which would be terrifying enough, but you could predict it, you could perhaps outsmart it, you could contain it, avoid it maybe. The slow,
Mm-hmm.
measured pace of Vader's breathing, and it's always this pace no matter what. It never changes. This is not wild at all. It's calm, it's unhurried, it's inevitable. And that is Vader in episode 4. Before we get to all the complexity that comes later, he is just this horrifying threat. He is a predator, he is chasing down the Death Star plans, and no one can hide. Nothing can stop him. He will get to you no matter what. He will get there faster than you. He will kill the strongest you have. It's easy for him. It's a joke to him. That is the sound we're hearing. It does literally sound like the measured, calm breathing of a predator stalking you, where its very presence is terrifying because you know what that
Yep.
means. Deer don't have to be told the wolf is a threat. It's clear. You know, you run. And if it runs after you, that's terrifying. But if it doesn't, and Vader never runs ever, he is a slow character, that's even more terrifying because he knows he'll get you eventually, and he knows you know that. And those are the other qualities that the breathing communicates: intelligence, focus, and self-control. You hear this kind of measured, slow pace of breathing in like martial artists, monks, which, yeah, the Jedi are, even Dark Jedi like Vader. He is a warrior monk gone bad who uses all those warrior monk powers not to be more peaceful and more present and more human. The breathing is specifically inhuman. It sounds like a machine breathing, which is a strange concept, but it's still super resonant. What it makes you feel is clear. This is a thing which is breathing, meaning it's sort of
I mean, it is Darth Vader's breathing machine that's helping him breathe.
alive. It's animate like you, but it's not like you. It's a machine. It doesn't feel, it doesn't care. Even though it looks human, even though it prompts the question of maybe I can relate to this, maybe this can relate to me, and even though it can certainly do everything that humans do, but no, this is cold, this is cruel, it's heartless, it's lifeless. And I'm sure if you're watching this, not just listening to the audio, you're seeing that everything I'm saying is not just concretized, but strengthened through Vader's aesthetic. Like we said, this thread is not a
Yep.
wild beast, it is an evil warrior monk, it is an evil samurai, with all the deadly meditative focus of an evil samurai, and the patience and the intelligence. That is what Vader's costume is, that's what it's modeled after, and that's reinforced by the inhumanness. He is a cold, heartless, mechanical man with his mechanically filtered voice and his mechanically filtered breathing and his mechanical lack of heart and his mechanical strength. But even more than that, his face is a skull. It's not just lifeless, but anti-life. It's death. The predator coming for you is death itself. What I want to impress upon you with this understanding what Vader was in episode 4, like just taking episode 4 in isolation, looking at that character, it's not just a horrifically potent characterization of threat. That alone would easily place Vader on the top list of villains of all time. It's just fantastic, creative, resonant character design. But more than that is if you take this idea of what Vader was and think about it in the context of what comes next, think about it in the context of his most iconic moment in the entire franchise, this.
Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father. He told me enough. He told me you killed him. No. I am your father.
Thought about in that context especially, it is difficult to conceptualize just how much of a twist this was to audiences at the time. It honestly gets me so annoyed when people nowadays delude themselves into thinking they saw this coming or would have seen this coming. Like, yeah, of course, growing up now in an age when the whole franchise is not just released but expanded and we got prequels and we got shows full of Anakin. But then even beyond that, just growing up in an age where Star Wars is common cultural knowledge and people are quoting this line and parodying this line and replicating this trope in so many other stories, surprise family, especially after Star Wars, just became such a common type of twist. You just see it over and over and over again. So yeah, of course with their 2024 brain you would have called it back then. But to be a real person for a second and think from the point of view of someone back in 1980 when only Star Wars had been released, i.e. there was no A New Hope, there was no episode 4, there were no episodes, there was just Star Wars. And in Star Wars the bad guy isn't just menacing and threatening, but is deadly force itself, is the embodiment of anti-life. And from that character we hear, I am your father, I gave you life. Just try and imagine just how much of an insane mind that is, especially. Okay, let me set the scene a little bit more here. We barely even talked about this. The other death aspect of Vader in episode 4 is, of course, the character history. It is fact that Darth Vader killed Anakin Skywalker. Until May 21st, 1980, that was a historical certainty. And not only does this make this whole death thing personal, this isn't someone I'm afraid of, this is someone who ruined my life. This is the reason I didn't grow up with a Jedi father and had to go live with the Muggles instead. So lots of complex emotions from my side. But on a broader existential level, Luke is obsessed with his dad. What Luke's dad was is what Luke aspires to be. Doesn't matter if it's just someone who leaves Tatooine or if it's a Jedi Knight who fought in the Clone Wars, Luke sees himself following in his father's footsteps.
Why wish you become Jedi?
Mostly because of my father, I guess.
His dad is how he defines himself. Anakin Skywalker is Luke's past, present, and future, and Vader murdered that. Vader took this golden past that helped Luke find comfort and better understand who he is, and he destroyed it. He took the lofty aspirations that Luke defined his future by, and he destroyed that too, and now he's trying to destroy present Luke as well. But also, it's not just that, it's I am your father. Meaning Vader has not just erased Luke's entire past that he cherishes so deeply, he has replaced it with the most horrifying version of the past imaginable. And then, immediately following that, comes this.
Join me, and together we can rule the galaxy as father and son.
Luke's future was his past. It was following in his father's footsteps. And with the revelation that Luke's father wasn't the honorable Jedi, but this, again, Vader has not just erased Luke's future, but is now replacing that as well with the most horrifying version of the future imaginable, joining this most evil person ever and becoming that. This is so far beyond what Luke's worst nightmare could ever have been. All of himself annihilated. Past, gone, darkened. Future, gone, darkened. And without that, you take this character who has always looked to the horizon, as Yoda says, whose mind has never been present with who he is. No past, no future, and Luke has no present either. He has completely lost who he is. That is this reaction. That is the horror that Luke is experiencing in this scene. The horror of what happens when Vader, the embodiment of death, finally catches you. It's worse than just killing you physically. He kills Luke existentially. He spiritually murders Luke. But we have just barely scratched the surface of the scene. My God, I just love these movies so much. I just want to highlight something on a writing level here. I think this is a phenomenon everyone should be aware of if you're trying to not just write good stuff, but great stuff. And it applies to way, way more than just depth. Experiencing something really high quality is nice, it's a good experience, but when something is like good quality, and then you have the experience of it exceeding your expectations, that is something you remember. That is the type of thing that becomes your favorite thing ever in my experience. Every favorite thing for me has had that period where I'm like, okay, I'm liking this, and then all of a sudden, oh my God, how does this have any right to be this amazing? Star Wars was already beloved. It already has a really good story. And then this moment wasn't just itself great, but it signaled a shift in depth. It wasn't just a plot twist. It wasn't just a character twist. It was a depth twist. It was a meaning twist. You think you're getting a story whose scope of meaning is like this, and then they do I Am Your Father, and in an instant, the entire story experience has just magnified its own complexity by like an exponential factor. It's like watching a checkers game and then the pieces suddenly become chess pieces. The story you love is going to give a whole nother level of emotion, of character development, of story awesome. You don't even know whether it's true or false. You just have to sit back and accept what you're seeing. Accept that something enormous is happening to the story. Okay, now the real question is, what is happening? What the heck is the story now? Because on the one hand, wow, yeah, Vader is way more terrifying than ever because he just wounded our hero at a level of severity previously unfathomable. He is so much scarier, so much more threatening than ever. But then also, he's Luke's dad. Luke's dad is alive. That is overturning like the main starting point of the entire story. And I'm not saying that in a bad way at all. I'm saying that in a what is this way? What does that do? The story cannot continue on with the good guy versus bad guy dynamic from before, because now it's like, well, what is Vader exactly? Luke had all this love, all this longing, all these positive aspirations connected to his dad, and that's still there. That can't just go away, at least not without being processed somehow. This is what Luke's whole life has always been about. It was already complex, and now it just got impossibly complex. And by the way, it would seem that there are still people who expect Luke to kill Darth Vader. That also doesn't just go away. Obi-Wan is still heavily implying that even pretty far into Return of the Jedi. Yoda sort of implies that too. So how's the story going to contend with that? And also, this big reveal isn't by any means like a reconciliation between father and son. They still are on opposite sides of the conflict. They still really want something different for each other and for themselves, and these two sides are mutually exclusive completely. And that also, like, Vader cut off Luke's hand, can't forget about that. So this has just gotten very, very, very complicated. And the scary thing from a writing perspective is that not every story can deal with a complexity jump of this level. Most stories just don't have the moving parts to smoothly transition into something this different. But Star Wars is so ready, it's insane. And I will ask you once again to listen.
It's terrifying and nostalgic.
With media analysis, perspective is really key. It's everything. It's important to get a wide variety of outlooks on life, philosophical diversity, epistemological diversity, cultural heritage, metaphysical frameworks. So, yeah, anyway, so I asked my vet about Darth Vader's breathing, and this is what she said.
If I had a dog that sounded like that, breathing, I would be really, really concerned.
It's profound. Okay, wait, hold on. I'm being totally serious here, and so here's the main point of her idea.
It's a dichotomy. It is both a measure of menacing, like it sounds very menacing, and a sign of vulnerability.
And then she went through everything we talked about earlier in the video about all the nuances that make Vader sound so menacing and so terrifying and so cold and so inhuman. And then, but
if you actually think about what the breathing means, it is actually massively vulnerable because it is essentially a ventilator. Like he cannot do well without it. That it is literally keeping him alive, and it is an outward sign of his vulnerability and frailty. And it is actually a mark of his humanity. Like from a medical viewpoint, like I thought about that sound and I'm like, oh my gosh, human ventilator, that just sounds like someone who is very, very vulnerable and very dependent and needing of that, right? But what I was thinking too is that because it encompasses both sides of it, it's very much a type for the conflict within him.
It is such a beautiful setup. It is so elegant. This aspect of Vader,
Ooh.
which is ever present, it's every moment on screen with him, is emanating opposite symbolisms that just both are there when we need to feel them, without the thing itself changing at all. It's not just that we have two meanings, but that their opposition to each other is reflected, exactly like she said, in the very fiber of what this character is. This inner conflict. Darth Vader, the cold predator, versus Anakin Skywalker, the caring father. Is this a mechanical man of twisted evil, or is Anakin still very much there, just barely hanging on, barely surviving, barely breathing? And this dichotomy isn't just built into the breathing. Look at this scene. Luke turns himself in, and he's really sure that his dad will turn him over to the Emperor, and then nope, and we get this exchange.
The Emperor will show you the true nature of the Force. He is your master now.
Then my father is truly dead.
But then the scene doesn't end there. What is that? What is going on in this moment? We get this Vader beat, and we're watching him, and it's just, we got nothing, because this character gives us nothing. What I'm trying to point out here is that in episode 4, Vader's suit was a concretization of his inhumanity, his coldness. It was the distance between something like him and humans like us. It was masking horrifying powers this being had in a way that we didn't need to see it. We just needed hints to know that this character was a powerful threat. That's what we got from the mask, from this whole image. And then you see this scene, and it's something else entirely. It's a different function. Vader's mask isn't creating coldness and emotional distance. Here it's hiding emotion. Here it's a barrier between what's going on with his character internally and what he shows to the world. The mask is like this brick wall of complexity, but it's emotional complexity, aka human complexity, specifically demonstrating how human he is. Again, same suit, same mask, but it's giving two meanings that are mutually exclusive, but both present.
That's
somehow.
actually interesting.
This is cold and human hate. This is vulnerable human emotion. Two meanings wherever we choose to see them, and overall expressing that this is a character in deep conflict. And building this up even more is the fact that we do have two villains in this movie. And on the surface, the relation between these two is clear. Vader explains it himself.
You don't know the power of the dark side. I must obey my master.
And there's a fascinating interplay just on the design level with these two. Listen to Squirrel explain this. This whole mask idea is hers, by the way.
You think that Vader is purely dark side with this kind of like impersonal nothingness, but then you encounter the Emperor, who is very similarly mutated and warped in the way that Vader is mutated and warped, but he wears it proudly. Like, he has naked face. He wants people to see that he's something monstrous, something other, something that's been like literally disfigured and out of function. He's not natural. Whereas Vader, I know that it's like part of him staying alive, but also him having the mask kind of, to me, indicates that he is not embracing that mutated side of himself, that he has some regrets about that's the way that he ended up. Whereas the Emperor kind of having, I mean, he is partially hooded, but he wants people to see that there's something not right with him, where he has this kind of just complete purity commitment, and not just on the dark side, but loving the fact that he's on the dark side and loving the fear that he inspires in others and loving his twisted sort of self.
So again, we have two lenses with which to view Vader. One is full of conflict, it's a human, vulnerable Vader, and the other is the old view, it's pure villain Vader. This, I think, is the nature of the complexity that I'm Your Father opens up for this character. Up until this moment, Vader is a character who has no inner world. And it's not just that, it's that he's not someone who can have an inner world. His role, his use in the story categorically excludes him from having that structure. He is more machine than man. It would be like the Death Star having feelings. And then once we get I Am Your Father, yes, we are overwhelmed by the horror and the pain, etc., but subtly, this unlocks his character. It opens up potentiality to be something else. It unlocks all these interpretations of what he is and how he is, what his life is like, what he's feeling, how to understand him. And I say unlocks because it doesn't activate any of it, just the potentiality is now there. So, now, what does Star Wars do with that potentiality? So, I want to take you back in time. This is not something I usually do, but I want to take you back in time to one of my childhood memories, which just kept poking at me the entire time I was writing this video and going, hey, old Shni, I am extremely relevant. What this whole discussion brings us to naturally is the climax of episode 6, which is one of my favorite scenes ever. It's the culmination of the entire trilogy. It is the defining moment of the greatest villain of all time. This has always been, for me, one of the most meaningful moments in any story. And I remember seeing it as a kid. I remember being terrified of the Emperor. I remember being scared out of my mind for Luke. And then when Vader would make his move, when he would pick up the Emperor and throw him into the pit and save the day, I just remember having this feeling of, he can't do that. How can he do that? How is that even possible? And I remember having those thoughts every single time I watched the movie. I knew what was going to happen. I'd seen it before, and still I'd stare at the screen like, how? It's impossible. I don't get how he can do that. And to be honest, I still have that feeling. I still get that like lizard brain media consumer sense of, what? How? Impossible. And this was and is why I love the scene, and it's why I love the character. This is not something that was confusing in a frustrating way. It was confusing in a great way, in a profound way. So I couldn't shake this memory and this emotional experience, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized there was a reality to what I was feeling. I'm not saying I sensed it back then as a little kid, or actually no, yeah, I am saying that. Modesty here would just be dumb. This is absolutely the type of thought that yes, kids 100% have in a simple form, and then when you get older, it's the same thought, but you can just articulate it better. Vader is a villain. He is not allowed to save the day. That was a thought I was having. According to Little Kid Shni, Star Wars is this guy's story. Remember, this is before the prequels, so it's this guy, Luke Skywalker. That is the big man. It's him. Luke Skywalker is the one who does the big heroics. He's the one who does the savings. We saw that in episode 4 with the Death Star. We saw him fail an epic bad guy fight in episode 5. So episode 6, it's time, right? Luke is the one. Luke is the hero, right? And then what happens? What situation do we find ourselves in at the end of the movie?
So be it. Jedi.
It's terrible. It's hopeless. And then, in this moment with Vader, what I'm feeling here, if I'm being precise, is not like this is a bad character who becomes good. No, it's way, way more radical than that. The power behind Vader's redemption, as I experienced it as a kid, was that it's almost like Vader becomes a character just to save his son. It's like we're watching something terrible happen, this hero I identify with is dying, and I, the viewer, can't do anything about it. Someone needs to step in, but there's no one. And then it's like the movie itself steps in and rescues the hero. The movie changes what it is. It would be like the Death Star having a change of heart and saving us. This story element, this deadly force, more machine than man, just comes online by sheer willpower and stops the entire trajectory of the story because it's too painful, because someone needs to save us. Combine this with the complexity, with the potentiality we talked about, and we just get the structure that is so effective. Because yes, the breathing could be heard as vulnerability, and yes, the mask could be a sign of conflict, but all of episode 4, all of episode 5, and most of episode 6 gives us no reason to interpret it that way, and every reason to interpret it the opposite way, that this is death, this is a pure villain. Until Vader himself breaks all your assumptions about who he is, about what he is. He's suddenly this living, breathing being of emotion, of vulnerability, of agency, of humanity. Ooh. And with that moment, immediately, we're hit with this. And we're hit with this. All the complexity we could have ever demanded from this character is already there, and it's been there the whole time, we just didn't see it. What's so powerful about Vader's redemption is that it's not just bad character makes good decision last minute. No, this is a character redefining his entire role in his own story. He's forcing you to go back and hear the vulnerability in his breathing and see the hesitation behind his mask. He forces you to go back and reinterpret entire scenes. When he meets with the Emperor in episode 5 and he suggests turning Luke instead of killing him, that's not him being sinister, that's compassion. He's practically begging the Emperor not to kill his son in the only way he thinks will work. When he tells Luke to join him, that's not evil villain monologue words. That is a father actually reaching out to save his son. And when he doesn't kill Luke, Luke was right. It was because there was still good in Vader. This was a character who had the entire story working against him. Everyone was telling Luke, you're wrong, Anakin Skywalker is dead, more machine than man, dog on a leash. You go down this naive wishful thinking route and the Emperor has already won, there's no hope for the galaxy. And you know what? Maybe that was true. Maybe I am a villain. But I can awaken as a protagonist of my own story at any point I choose. I can look at a past that was truly ambiguous and decide, I'm telling you it's this way. I'm telling you my story was leading here the whole time. I'm the one who gets to decide what my journey is. Not you, and certainly not you. What makes Vader's choice hit especially hard emotionally is that he's redefining himself in this deeply personal way. Vader is a political player on the galactic
yep.
stage. He is a military force unto himself. He is a Sith Lord, apprentice to the most powerful Sith Lord ever, and he chooses to redefine himself as a father. He chooses to see himself not as millions or even billions of life forms see him, not even as he sees himself, not as his worst enemies or strongest allies see him. He chooses to see himself as only his son sees him. That perspective means more to him than anything. I think that gets to the heart of our original question about episode 6, which is, what is the story after the I am your father reveal? It's not just a redemption story. What Star Wars builds itself into, the way it escalates, is by getting more and more personal, more and more relatable, more and more about meaningful human topics. By the end of Star Wars Episode 6, by the time we get to the climax of this galactic drama, we're left with a story that's about my life, a story that's about everyday morality. That's what Star Wars becomes. And that is beyond rare for sci-fi and fantasy, where escalation usually takes the form of just higher and higher stakes. Save the country, save the planet, save the universe, save the multiverse, but save it for what? Save it empowered by what? What does it even mean to save it? Star Wars goes in the opposite direction. I said in my last video and in previous videos that my definition of the big grand theme of this franchise is the biggest cosmic events are determined by the small moral decisions of individuals. Forget battle stations that can destroy planets, it's about being a good friend. Forget fighting the Galactic Empire, it's about treating people with respect. It's about prioritizing the well-being of others over yourself. It's about dissolving differences and seeing the fundamental connection between all life. So in Star Wars, as the scope of what's at stake gets bigger and bigger, the scope of character choice must necessarily get smaller and smaller, closer and closer to the type of morality I know and value for my own normal life. And that is what Star Wars values primarily. It's not like other stories that do take up topics like friendship and family. And these are great stories, don't get me wrong, but they frame these small picture morality topics as means for some big picture plot thing that we're meant to care about more. Save everyone, save the universe, whatever, that's what's important. But in Star Wars, no. In Star Wars, the biggest picture is the smallest picture. In episode 6, the Death Star, the planet-destroying battle station, is the secondary plot. More important than anything is the Luke-Vader Emperor confrontation. More important than anything is light side, dark side. It's the moral journey of the characters.
Exactly.
This is why I can watch like Avengers Endgame and I can be inspired, I can be awed. But the place that story has to go in order to have that effect has necessarily distanced me from seeing myself in my heroes, much less seeing myself in Thanos. The story of Paul Atreides versus the Harkonnens is a powerful spectacle. There's a lot to study there. Characters like William Wallace in Braveheart, or Katsumoto in Last Samurai, or King Leonidas in 300. There's a lot to admire there. But when it comes to taking the meaning of these stories I love and bringing it into my own life, me with my tiny mundane existence, I'm very limited with those stories, in a way that I'm not with Star Wars. Like Swerkle's idea for my Jedi video, what Star Wars values through its story isn't the flashy powers, and it's not the big picture accomplishments either. It's the personal character stuff that I can do. I can feel like a Jedi by being at peace. I can feel like I'm using the Force by being in the zone and feeling connected to life around me. And with Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, I can bring the meaning of these characters' arcs into my own life by being a better son, by being a better parent, by seeing the good in people around me so strongly that they become good, that they choose to see themselves with all the love that I have when I look at them. Or alternatively, by seeing myself with the faith that others have in me, and using that as motivation to do good and change myself in ways I never thought possible. That is the story of Darth Vader, and that is why I think he is the greatest villainous character of all time. Subscribe. Shout outs to all my patrons, especially new high tier patrons, Devious Gnome, Odysseus, Dan.
Alright, let's move on to the next video. Alright.
Apple just lost one
Here we go.
of their most important lawsuits ever. This will cost them billions, yet it was against a very strange opponent. But somehow, that's just the start of their problems. Apple is struggling. Since December, their stock is down about 20%. That's almost $1 trillion in market cap. And to be honest, their stock hasn't moved all that much in the last 5 years itself. They're currently the weakest performer of the Magnificent Seven. What happened? Apple has historically been at the top of the New York Stock Exchange. Well, they're at war on every front, and it's not just the lawsuit that they're losing. It all began in August 2020 with one small update, and strangest of all, it was in Fortnite, which, if you're not familiar, is one of the biggest games in the world. Epic Games added a new payment option to Fortnite on iOS, a direct pay system outside the app with a 20% discount. Apple immediately removed Fortnite from the App Store, and Epic then sued Apple that very day. Why did Epic offer a discount, and why did Apple ban Fortnite, and why was Epic ready to take Apple to the court the very next day? As it turns out, this was all part of the plan. Let's take a step back. Apple takes a cut from all app purchases, be it paid apps or in-app purchases. For most, this is 30%, and 15% for developers making under $1 million a year. But these purchases had to be in the iOS app. No buttons or links could direct users to make purchases elsewhere, as Apple didn't want anyone to work around their 30% cut. This is why some subscriptions like Patreon were more expensive in iOS. They owned the App Store and they got a huge amount of all revenue just for running the store. No one was a huge fan of this, but it was just the way things were. That brings us to Epic Games and its founder, Tim Sweeney. Epic Games, despite being a $30 billion company, was the underdog. It was a David and Goliath situation against the $2 trillion Apple. But Epic wasn't a small player. Behind them are massive shareholders, Tencent, Walt Disney, and Sony. Why? Fortnite. The game needs no introduction. It makes billions of dollars from
Yep.
skins and crossovers of pretty much every popular IP and character ever made. DC Comics, Marvel, The Weeknd, Sabrina Carpenter, Star Wars, Halo, LeBron James, One Piece, etc. Epic was making billions from these crossovers. But then there was Apple. From Fortnite on iOS, they were taking 30% of everything. Spider-Man skin, Apple takes 30%. Battle Pass, Apple takes 30% for just hosting the app on the store. Tim wasn't a fan. Even as far back as 2015, Epic's founder Tim Sweeney had been publicly criticizing Apple for this. He believed it was an illegal monopoly. So Epic laid a trap. In 2019, Epic began pouring millions into lawyers and a PR firm. This was Project Liberty. They were preparing for war. Then Epic rolled out the update. Apple took the bait and removed Fortnite, and that very day, Epic filed a lawsuit. Apple's conduct has caused and continues to cause Epic financial harm. Epic is not bringing this case to recover these damages. Epic is not seeking any monetary damages. Instead, Epic seeks to end Apple's dominance over key technology markets, open up the space for progress and ingenuity, and ensure that Apple's mobile devices are open to the same competition as Apple's personal computers. Tim Sweeney wanted to take down Apple's monopoly, but things didn't play out as he hoped. On September 10, 2021, the judge ruled in favor of Apple. They were not found to be a monopoly, but restricting external payments violated California's unfair competition law. Apple was ordered to allow out-of-app purchases and could not prevent apps from communicating to users about them. But Apple wasn't about to give up just yet. After appeal after appeal, and dragging it through courts and being thrown out of the Supreme Court, 4 years later, Apple finally began to comply in 2024. But it was malicious compliance. Apple rolled out its new terms and they weren't exactly good. Buttons and links to external purchases were allowed, but it came with a 27% commission fee or an Apple tax with a 3 to 6% processing fee. Essentially, developers could direct users elsewhere, but it was the exact same as buying in the App Store. Things immediately went back to court, and Epic Games argued that Apple was blatantly violating the court order. But somehow, the commission wasn't even the worst part. That was the scare screens. If you ever go to an external link, Apple would give you a message like, "You're about to go to an external website. Apple is not responsible for the privacy or security of purchase made on the web." So, what's wrong with this? Well, even if it's a perfectly safe platform like Netflix, Spotify, or Epic Games, Apple is implying danger made to make users second guess. There also seems to be double standards, since Apple doesn't seem to mind if you follow links in Mail or other apps, only when you leave the App Store to spend money elsewhere. That's when they were suddenly worried about your security. Sounds more like a toxic parent than anything else, yet there's still more. Apple dictates all aspects of these links and it doesn't allow them in the app's ordinary payment flow, and requires developers to open a generic web browser session, forcing the user to log into the developer's website again and search all over again for the digital item they wanted to buy. Essentially, Apple was making it as difficult as possible to do anything except stay on their platform so they get the most money. In response, Apple said it undertook extensive efforts to comply while preserving the fundamental features of Apple's business model and safeguarding consumers. Hardly sounds like fair competition. Instead, like an abuse of a monopoly, and the courts agreed. District Judge Yvonne Gonzalez Rogers didn't hold back. 1. The court found that Apple's 30% commission allowed it to reap super competitive operating margins and was not tied to the value of its intellectual property, and it thus was anti-competitive. Apple's response charged a 27% commission on off-app purchases where it had previously charged nothing. 2. The court had prohibited Apple from denying developers the ability to communicate with and direct consumers to other purchasing mechanisms. Apple's response imposed new barriers and requirements to increase friction and breakage rates with full-page scare screens, static URLs, and generic statements. But here's where it gets really good. Judge Rogers continued by saying, to hide the truth, Vice President of Finance Alex Roman outright lied under oath. Internally, Philip Schiller had advocated that Apple comply with the injunction, but Tim Cook ignored Schiller and instead allowed Chief Financial Officer Luca Maestri and his finance team to convince him otherwise. Cook chose poorly. The court refers the matter to the Northern District of California to investigate whether criminal contempt proceedings are appropriate. This is an injunction, not a negotiation. There are no do-overs once a party willfully disregards a court order. Apple had lost and Epic had won. The long national nightmare of the Apple tax is ended, said Sweeney. Within days, the App Store guidelines were updated and everyone quickly took notice. Spotify quickly rolled out payment options outside the iOS app. Patreon announced creators can receive payment.
What the video doesn't talk about is basically that California court also imply that if they continue to be maliciously compliant and continue to just ignore court orders, is that they will be barred from doing business in California. That means they would have to remove their HQ. They have to move their HQ somewhere else. They would have to stop supporting Apple Pay in the state of California as well. And basically, they were not allowed to do if they continue to ignore. Basically, for people who are not in America, basically, if a company blatantly ignores court orders, either one, they can receive a large fine, which most likely it's insignificant to large companies in general. Or two, this is more of the extreme. Basically, company will be have federal limitations put on them. Brain. Trying to find the right source here. Okay, to put it in short, either comply with the law or be kicked out of the country. That's what telling companies basically that.
Payments directly. Stripe released info on how to let customers buy goods outside the app. And of course, Fortnite was allowed back on the App Store with their new payment options. Whether you like Apple or not, this is a big win for the consumer. I also don't think Tim Sweeney did all this just for consumers, as the lawsuit means Epic will make much more money over the long term. But still, in doing so, things are much better for everyone except Apple, who are now generating billions less. Yet somehow, this is just the tip of the iceberg. They're actually beset on all fronts. This monumental historic court case might be the least of Apple's problems. Apple is trying to hold on to every bit of revenue they can, because globally, they're in big trouble. Much of that relates to China. Cook in 2023 revealed that over 95% of Apple's products are still manufactured and assembled in China. Apple isn't just reliant on China, they're entirely dependent on them. The screens are produced by LG and Samsung but assembled in China. Same thing with the processors, manufactured in Taiwan but assembled in China along with the cameras from Sony. Apple has over 1,600 factories in China. Over 5 million people are in some way employed by Apple and their manufacturing partner Foxconn. And it's obvious why. In 2001, when Apple first began their exodus to China, the average annual wage was about 9,333 yuan a year, or about $1,127 US. In America, it was about $30,800, or almost 30 times higher. Not only was it cheaper, but also faster, with much of the manufacturing and logistics sites right next to each other. China welcomed Apple with open arms. Gigantic factories were built, roads were paved, housing for workers were constructed, even airports were built.
I was around when they called up the local city and asked them to build another airport because we needed a larger airport to ship out more goods.
China made Apple rich and vice versa, but now the costs are catching up. The cost of labor in China has risen. In 2023, it was more than double what it was in 2013. Citizens have gotten richer, more educated, and more skilled, and the salaries in Foxconn and other factories have gradually gone up. And young people in China today aren't so interested in low-cost repetitive factory work, and you can't really blame them.
They have breakfast, they go to work, they work a solid shift, they come back to their dormitory, they sleep. It's a very dehumanizing place, and the workers are little more than the machines there.
Also, Apple was once the biggest smartphone brand in China, but in 2024, they dropped all the way to third place and only have 15% market share after iPhone sales dropped over 18%, the largest drop they've seen in 8 years. Apple used to be seen as the most premium, high-quality products, but customers aren't buying it anymore. Local brands like Huawei and Vivo have caught up, offering high-quality phones for much cheaper. But that's not even the worst of it. With Trump in office, he began the trade war with China.
In particular, in the very near future, we're going to be placing tariffs on foreign production of computer chips, semiconductors, and pharmaceuticals to return production of these essential goods to the United States of America.
In February, he placed a 10% tariff on all imports from China, and the next month he raised it to 20%. This was followed by a back and forth between the US and China, which ended with tariffs of up to 145%. To make matters worse, last time Apple escaped these tariffs, but not this time. One Apple veteran said, "The supply chain all goes back to one guy, Tim Cook. This mess is his fault." This isn't just the buck stops at the top, it's that the buck stops with the guy who headed the supply chain, and Tim is the master of supply chain. And that's not even mentioning China's increasing scrutiny of foreign companies like the 2017 China cybersecurity law, which requires data generated in China to be stored within the country, or the 2021 anti-foreign sanctions law. If companies follow sanctions placed on them by the West, the Chinese government will punish them. And most of all, the company law in 2024, where foreign companies in China with over 300 employees must put a Chinese employee on the board of directors. So, what's Tim Cook doing now? How is he navigating this mess? Well, India. Cook has known about this problem for a while, but only now is it becoming a crisis. For a few years, he's been trying to make Apple less reliant on China, keyword being trying. India accounted for 14% of iPhone production in 2024. Impressive, but it shows how slow this is going to be, and it's likely going to be a lot longer than Cook hopes. Predictions indicate India's iPhone production volumes could match China's within 5 years. However, achieving comparable revenue contributions to Apple's global operations could take 10 to 15 years. Apple is trying to break up with China, but it's still going to take a long time to match the efficiency and lower costs. And all of that is not even mentioning stagnating iPhone upgrades and all the damage that's causing, or the recent botched launch of Apple Intelligence. Be it the lawsuit, the tariffs, rising costs in China, or the recent drama in WWDC 2025, Apple is in trouble, but it's hard to feel sorry for them. Most of these issues are somewhat self-imposed. They're only as severe as they are because Apple pushed their luck as far as they could, and now they're out of luck. But until then, I'm Hari, and I'll see you guys on the next one.
Ooh, that was a long-winded documentary. Anywho,
Florida mom arrested
here we go.
after letting 7-year-old walk to the park alone. What? I'm not letting my 7-year-old go outside. I'm not letting my 7-year-old watch TV. I'm probably not even giving my 7-year-old food and water to drink, okay? Maybe that is neglect, but okay, never mind.
You wanna go there? Gonna need a car. You want this? You gotta pay some gas to go to the car. Car.
Gen Alpha has a lot of problems, and one of those problems is the lack of going outside and touching grass. I mean, Gen Z doesn't really go outside, and ever since, 2020, I haven't touched grass since, okay? I'm locked up in a basement, in a box currently as we speak, filming this video. That is besides the point. So today we're gonna check out why kids don't go outside anymore.
Children and teenagers these days aren't going outside as much as before.
Is that so?
50 years ago, nearly half of all kids in America...
Wait, we could watch the original video.
Children and teenagers...
Alright, there we go.
Children and teenagers these days aren't going outside as much as before. 50 years ago, nearly half of all kids in America walked or bike to school. Today, it's less than 13%. This is largely due to the lack of independence children have. Parents are more worried than ever about letting their kids go out on their own, because look at all these kidnappers outside. Look at them. However, stranger kidnappings are astonishingly rare, and these cases are always sensationalized in the media. The real threat to the safety of children are cars. Vehicle collisions are the #1 cause of death among children and teenagers, killing thousands and injuring tens of thousands every year. When you look at how our cities are designed, none of this is surprising. Modern suburbs, and especially American suburbs, are car dependent. Neighborhoods are endless mazes of single-family homes with streets laid out in winding cul-de-sacs. Businesses sit behind giant parking lots with wide multi-lane roads full of high-speed car traffic. This forces you to cross these big intersections designed for the flow of vehicles rather than the safety of people. This creates a vicious cycle where the dangerous streets make parents drive their kids more, but by doing so, they're adding more cars to the problem. Recently, the channel Oh the Urbanity made a video about Miami, and they caught this footage of a school bus having to stop in an angle and block traffic just so kids can safely get off. Because drivers literally would not stop. So when everything's too far away and crossing the street is too dangerous, children have zero independent mobility until they turn 16 and get a driver's license. Most of the world sets their legal driving age to 18, and for good reason. Teenage drivers are 4 times more likely to crash than adults, mainly due to immaturity and inexperience. But in most of North America, teenagers as young as 16 can drive unsupervised, and in some places, it's as young as 14. If we had viable alternatives to driving, our legal driving age wouldn't have to be so low, and teenagers wouldn't have to risk their lives just so they can have some independence. Until then, children have to rely on mommy and daddy to chauffeur them everywhere. This is where the soccer mom stereotype comes from, someone who spends all their time driving their kids to and from different activities. In car-dependent suburbia, dropping off or picking up kids from school becomes this massive ordeal, with cars backing up for miles of traffic. These schools may be far away and are sometimes in rural locations, but this is primarily due to sprawling car-centric design. Due to the low density of the suburbs, schools have to consolidate into fewer but larger facilities that are farther away, rather than having more smaller schools that are closer. Regardless, schools being in rural places does not justify the lack of infrastructure. This beautiful video by Bicycle Dutch shows how majority of all children in the Netherlands bike themselves to school, even if it's miles away in a rural area. They can do this because they've built safe cycling infrastructure throughout all their cities and the entire country. We might not build bike lanes across the whole country like the Dutch, but even if a fraction of these kids were able to walk or bike to school, it would make a huge difference for both parents and the development of children. A 2002 psychology study asked elementary school students to draw a map of their path to school, and the results were just sad. The child who walked to school on their own produced this accurate detailed drawing with various landmarks along the way. The child who walked with an adult got the orientation wrong, but still roughly identified the right directions. But this is the drawing from the child who was driven to school. Studies in Switzerland from the 90s found that children who freely played in their neighborhood on their own spent twice as much time outside, were way more active, had more than twice as many friends, and had better motor and social skills compared to kids who played in a park under parental supervision. Without independent mobility, children don't get as much exercise, contributing to the major child obesity crisis in the US. It also prevents them from, going out and socializing. Studies show that children with less independence are lonelier as they have a weaker sense of community, lower sense of safety, and have fewer activities with friends. The emptiness of
Gee,
car
who would have
dependent suburbia
thought?
also makes it feel more dangerous. In Jane Jacobs' book, The Death and Life of Great American Cities, she explains the concept known as eyes on the street. It basically means that vibrant and lively streets feel safer as there are more people around and thus more eyes to deter bad behavior. This is why dark alleyways or streets at nighttime feel dangerous. But without people regularly walking by or casual onlookers watching the street, suburbia feels lonely and creepy. If a child were to be kidnapped outside, no one would notice. Over the past few decades, this sense of danger has changed our cultural attitudes towards children being out on their own, to the point where it can literally land you in jail. Like Nicole Gainey, who was arrested and charged with child neglect for letting her son walk to the park alone. Or Deborah Harrell, who spent 17 days in prison
Yeah.
and temporarily lost custody of her child, all for letting her daughter play in the park alone while she was working at a nearby McDonald's. An even more ridiculous case was Jackie Kendrick, who got reported to Child Services for letting her two kids play in her own backyard while she watched them inside. Some schools in the US even have rules not allowing anyone to walk at all, so even if you are with your child, you might end up like Jim Howie from Tennessee, who got arrested for picking his kids up from
Oofers. Big oofers.
school on foot instead of driving a car. Even if a child could
Oh yeah,
walk
that
or
is just
bike
fucked
around
up.
on their own,
Okay, so that is just fucked up. Cause literally parents would use the front door of the school saying, "Hey, I need to pick my child up because XYZ doctor's appointment, whatever." Or a parent would call school and say, "Hey, I just remembered my child has a doctor's appointment at, let's say, 1 p.m. Sibling would leave the bus stop because they had school as well. Same thing for my little sibling would wait at the bus stop for me to get off the bus, and then we walk home together. Like okay, did he hold on? If I can recall from this video, did they say arrested for like picking up their 11-year-old on foot? Wasn't the legal age to walk yourself to from bus stop to your home, or if your home was like literally right next to the school, wasn't the legal age 11 years old to walk yourself home and from home to school and back in America? When did this law change? Okay, I would need to look up this. I would need to look this up and see when it was changed.
Car-dependent suburbia is bland. There's almost nothing to do and nowhere to go apart from a park or the shopping mall. Additionally, our public spaces are actively designed specifically to keep kids away. An example of this are those metal studs that are placed on benches or railings to prevent skateboarding. Many malls, amusement parks, and even Chick-fil-A are flat out banning teenagers from entering without parental supervision. When the streets are too dangerous and there aren't any places to hang out in, is it a surprise that kids these days want to stay at home all day, playing video games and watching Skibbity Toilet? Social media apps like TikTok basically serve as online public spaces where people can share their voices in an open environment. However, this is just as problematic as Elon Musk saying that Twitter will be the digital town square.
Also, when the I think it was like the beginning of this year, companies were starting to bar kids from entering place with unsupervised. I mean, I understand up until the age of like, let's say, up until the age of, I say, 14 years old, when parents are giving them like an allowance for doing chores and stuff like that. I mean, like, okay, if what the fuck? Hold on, did the stream suddenly like went offline, or hold on. Okay, so stream is good on Twitch, but the Kick app is saying the stream is not. Oh, stream is on. Okay, there we go. Yeah, there we go. All right. But still, like, I don't know. I can't say much about it since it was only until I was what, 16 years old. Okay, with a little bit of supervision at 14 years old, I was allowed to roam around the mall. It was only, I think it was a family outing. We all agreed, hey, let's meet at this spot at this specific time. Feel free to roam around everywhere. Yeah, and then when the specific time came, we all went to that specific location, and we would do a head count, make sure everyone is here.
With the recent motions to ban TikTok in the US, there's a critical lack of true public spaces that are accessible to young people. Car dependency in North America is not an inevitable thing. Suburbia doesn't have to be built this way. It's possible to make our streets safer and encourage more outdoor activity by changing our infrastructure. This means narrowing streets, installing protected bike lanes, and adding traffic calming measures to slow down cars and prevent collisions. We also need to change our zoning laws to allow higher density houses and small businesses to be built in the suburbs so that people can live closer to amenities. These changes don't only benefit children. When a city is safe and comfortable enough for kids, then it's safe and comfortable for everyone. If you wouldn't let your child ride in this bike lane by themselves, then no one will, because it's not designed properly, period. This is why in the few remaining walkable neighborhoods that do exist in North America, you will see lots of children walking to and from school all by themselves. This is also very common in East Asian cities, which they've achieved by having good public transit and dense urban development that creates eyes on the street. Not to mention the amount of pedestrian space you find, which provide attractive public spaces for teenagers to hang out. All of these things are completely possible to build in North America, but we just don't. Laws like zoning codes or parking requirements make it illegal to build anything other than car-dependent suburbs. We also continue to throw money at expensive road infrastructure, leaving almost nothing for pedestrian or transit projects. Car culture is so prevalent that many people simply believe that anything other than cars are inherently worse. Cause yeah, when you spend ludicrous amounts of money subsidizing highways in suburbs, of course driving is going to be the only option. So even when bike lanes or public transit projects are proposed, you get tons of excuses from NIMBYs about all the traffic it will cause or where am I gonna park my car? These people really like to blame the problems that cars create on other modes of transportation. Is your city running out of money and on the verge of bankruptcy? Clearly it's because of all those bike lanes. Don't look at all those billions of dollars that we're about to spend on the highway. That's not it. Most of these are policy issues, policies made by groups of old people sitting in a government building which are then followed by some other old people who call themselves planners and engineers. So to actually make changes and improve our cities, we need more civic engagement. Currently, most people who vote and attend city council meetings are at least 50 years old. The direction our cities are going in is being determined by a bunch of boomers.
Cycling is an important mode of transportation. It helps us reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It improves our health.
But I think Gen Z and even sometimes millennials are underrepresented in this issue. I truly believe that younger people want more walkable cities, and we have the power to make it a reality. This is partly why I started making these videos in the first place. Our cities have a huge impact on younger people, and we deserve to have a say on how they're built, even if you're not a professional planner or don't know what exclusionary zoning means. It's time to stop making excuses for our bad urban design and ask ourselves, do we want our cities to prioritize moving as much cars as possible, or do we want to actually prioritize people?
Yeah, basically. Basically so, really. And also the fact that zoning laws is basically just shitifying life itself. Let's see here. Alright.
If monkeys buy a copy of Donkey Kong Country, they should be able to play whenever they want, whether it's 2 a.m., 2077, or on their OG Nintendo Switch. But today, if monkeys buy a digital copy of any game, they run the risk of not being able to play it in a few years' time. Why? Because corpo monkeys at the top of many previously celebrated AAA giants have changed the rules. Hidden in legalese within their terms of service agreements, they're able to erase entire games and servers which are no longer hitting targets. Then terminate access to products and services you've paid for using your hard-earned bananas. Those bananas you spent on cosmetics, DLC, expansions, all gone. Just because the game is no longer profitable. The games industry is killing games, and it's got to stop. Before we move on, I understand that this is a little different from the stuff you see on my channel, but make no mistake, what's happening in the games industry is just as absurd as the other things I cover. So how are games being killed? For all the non-gamers in my audience, here's a quick explanation. Imagine you've been using Photoshop 7 for years. You've paid for it, learned it, and built your entire workflow around it. But one day, let's say Adobe decides Photoshop 7 is no longer profitable. They force you to upgrade, shut down the cloud servers holding hours of your hard work, and prevent you from opening the application entirely. Suddenly, you can't use Photoshop anymore, even though you paid for it using your bananas. Your ownership? Your access to a service you paid for? Gone. You get no say, you don't get a refund, and worst of all, you're the one left holding the bag. That's what's happening with hundreds of games.
Yep.
Games like the Crew, Overwatch, Gran Turismo, and the FIFA franchises are all guilty of this. Older, standalone games from the mid-2010s are slowly being delisted from stores. As of writing this video, many are no longer playable. The average monkeys who bought these games, the ones who spent on in-game cosmetics, currencies, and expansions, They might as well have thrown their hard-earned bananas into the void. They lost access to a product they paid for, all because a company decided that preserving it didn't agree with their bottom line. And in doing so, they've effectively stolen your hard-earned bananas and given you nothing in return. But why are games being killed? Many old games are shot between the eyes in their sleep for many reasons. Some publishers claim that it's no longer profitable to maintain servers. Others hide behind low player counts. And the worst of all, cite the abomination of live service business models. But don't get it twisted. Gone are the days where gamers made games. Now it's just soulless husks focused on one thing: milking customers for all the bananas they've got. Corpo monkeys do not care about the friends you made playing Halo Online, the euphoria from clearing a hard raid for the first time, or your love of the art created by the developers. They care about profit margins and quarterly reports. If a game isn't squeezing out enough bananas to hit their targets, they pull the plug. On paper, this might make sense. And some monkeys are very quick to point out that there's no point in keeping a game alive if it's not making money. But every time a company pulls the plug, they're telling you that your trust and support via your hard-earned bananas don't matter. You paid for a product, not a rental. This isn't bad business. It's spitting in the face of the consumer. If we let companies get away with this, what's next? Will they start deleting your single-player games? Charging you to
Yes.
customize your character? Ask you to swipe your credit card for revives? Oh wait, it's already happening. This is a slippery slope, greased with corporate indifference and consumer apathy. It's a scam, dressed up in legalese. And the worst part is that industry giants like Blizzard have started sneaking this into their TOS forms. And here's the real punchline. Many of these games have single-player modes that can be played without an internet connection. Overwatch, Gran Turismo, both have content that could work perfectly fine without servers. So why can't you play them? Because the Corpo monkeys would rather flip the off switch and push you to spend another 80 bananas on their newer release. And to be clear, it's unrealistic to expect old games to be supported with new content forever. However, they should be playable at the very least. Old games should come with an end-of-life plan. It could be a final patch which makes the game playable without the need for an internet connection,
Which what
servers,
Nintendo did
or
with
further support from the developers.
yeah.
But sadly, this isn't.
Nintendo did that with Animal Crossing. So I think it was Animal Crossing New Leaf. Yeah, basically they put out a paid patch. Well, technically, a quote unquote new game is actually a paid patch. Basically, it's labeled as Animal Crossing New Leaf Complete, which basically comes with everything from all the patches, all the updates from launch until end of life, as well as an additional year of offline content. Corpos don't want to do that because it's not profitable. You know what else not profitable? Destroying customers' trust, which leads to less sales in the long term. Because with corporate America, most companies are focused on short-term profits just to please their shareholders. I get the reason why, but shareholder culture needs to stop because it's literally destroying everything beyond video games as well.
Happening. The bottom line is this: games are no longer being viewed as art to be protected, but a means for investors and shareholders to turn a profit. But who wins from killing games? It's the Corpo monkeys. The ones who see games not as art, but as a means to earn their annual bonus. When a game gets axed, they get to cut costs, free up server space, and funnel players into their supposedly newer and better release. Just look at Overwatch 2. Exactly the same game with some features changed here and there. Oh, but you bet there's loads of paid skins, battle passes, and time-gated exclusives. Killing old releases and forcing players onto their new game gives publishers all the leverage. You're not a customer anymore. You're a data point on a spreadsheet, a contributor to the bottom line. Other than the customers, there's another group who are being forced to participate in this shit show. The developers, the real artists. They lose too. Most devs, sadly, have no say if their games live or die. Unless they're fully independent, they're just as powerless as the players. And most of the time, the devs are gamers too. Their art, their legacy, and potentially years of toil destroyed in the course of a single boardroom meeting. And when companies make games less about art and more about profitability, they end up making safe, formulaic slop with every release. Because there's no incentive to try something new, no room to experiment. It's the same shit, but different year.
Right.
Where love and passion once gave us great games, now sits greed and corporate interests. What I'm trying to say is this: killing games does nothing for the customer or the developers. It puts all the power in the hands of the corporation and leaves both players and developers at their mercy. The only ones who win are the ones who never cared about games in the first place. But it's not over yet. Even though this all looks incredibly bleak, we're not powerless. There's an initiative called Stop Killing Games. And it's a campaign started by regular monkeys challenging the legality of publishers destroying video games they have sold to customers. You can check out this website here for details, but here's a brief summary. The initiative calls for companies to keep games playable, even if they're no longer profitable, even if the servers go dark. At the very least, let us play the single-player modes we paid for with our hard-earned bananas. I would sign it myself, but unfortunately, the petition is only available to EU citizens. So if you're an EU citizen, please consider signing the petition to preserve the games we enjoy. Will it guarantee change? Maybe, maybe not. But every movement starts with a signal. Even if this never makes it into the code of law, it tells the industry that the monkeys are watching, and we're not happy with how things are going.
I want to say, in the case of Ubisoft axing the crew and basically not telling customers about losing access to their save files and all that, and actively trying to scrub it under the rug. Yeah, no shit, they got in trouble with the EU, US, and various countries. No shit, they're getting sued in multiple countries. No shit, that anti-consumer practices will get you in trouble with both the public and the governments. So I'm gonna say, Ubisoft, you play that stupid game, you won that stupid prize. You fucked around and you found out. You don't like finding out. You like fucking around, but you don't like finding out. Stupid ass motherfuckers. Anyways.
Enough monkeys put our foot down? Maybe, just maybe, some companies will rethink their decisions before pulling the plug on the next game. Because after all, monkeys strong together. And it's working. While I was editing this video,
what company, hold on, I want to say this real quick. What companies don't like to admit, even though their shareholders are directly funding and profiting off of companies are doing, the true shareholders is the public, or the court of public opinion. So the court of public opinion is strong enough. This will make this will scare the court of public opinion. If the court of public opinion's backlash is strong enough, it will scare the shareholders, and it will scare big corpos in tandem. Basically, if we can trigger a chain reaction with backlash, we as a people have power to make change. But if we just sit around twiddling our thumbs, change ain't gonna fucking happen. No shit. If you do nothing, nothing will happen. No shit.
This can only mean one thing. The corpo monkeys are scared. Let's keep it that way. So if you too care about preserving art, please consider signing the petition and add your voice to the choir of hundreds of thousands of others just like it. And if you're not part of the EU, you can help by spreading the word.
Mm-hmm.
Tell your friends, your guildmates, your family. Every little bit helps. If any monkeys are confused, just remember that this is a simple explainer of how the gaming industry is killing art. And unlike the previous videos, please absolutely consider this as a call to action to
Games
go sign a
are a
petition
form of
today.
art.
Thank you so much for watching.
Should be
Please let
respected.
me know what you'd like to see me cover next.
Games are a form of art and it should be respected. Should be. But unfortunately, it's not really respected by corporals. And we have to force them to respect not only games, but also our autonomy as well. Okay, let me patch this up real quick. And this. Alright.
This is a scam awareness video about a scam that specifically targets victims who are willing to act in a dishonest or unscrupulous way. Now, I'm sure that's not you, dear viewer, but I think there's still something interesting to look at here. You may or may not have seen comments like this one on YouTube or elsewhere on the internet. Thanks for sharing such valuable information. I need some advice. I have a SafePal wallet with USDT and I have the seed phrase: aquarium, friendly, decline, shark, bucket, piano, shout, apple, expand, satellite, catamaran, detergent. What's the best way to send them to Binance? Now, I'm no crypto bro, so some of the exact detail that follows might not be precisely correct, and anyway, will be simplified according to my own understanding, and in order to just describe this whole thing accessibly. Let's break this down. The first part, thanks for sharing such valuable information, is a little bit of chaff or distraction that's supposed to make it look like genuine praise for the YouTuber whose video this is posted under. It's just supposed to make this comment look, at a very brief glance, like it's a positive and acceptable comment. I need some advice. I have a SafePal wallet. SafePal is a service that people use to buy, sell and manage cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin, Ethereum and so on. When you have an account with SafePal, you can create things called wallets, which are sort of logical containers for storing cryptocurrency values. You can create these through an app, but they also make physical hardware wallet devices that can be used to store cryptocurrency. These wallets are secured by a seed phrase, which is a bit like a password, but it's composed of a string of 12, 15, 18 or 24 words, and it's used to identify, secure and encrypt the wallet. So if you have an account with SafePal or something compatible with it, and you know the seed phrase for a wallet, you can open the wallet and see and access the cryptocurrency values inside it. By the way, I should probably mention at this point that the seed phrase I showed and read out earlier in this video is just an example I made up, but that's what they look like, a string of at least 12 random words. So this comment, taken at face value, looks like some very naive person who owns cryptocurrency has just given away their critical wallet credentials on the public internet. What a foolish thing to do, or it would be if this were not a scam. Here's what's supposed to happen next. The comment is seen by a person who knows that this would give them access to the wallet, and that this represents an opportunity to steal the valuable contents. Or maybe it's just seen by someone curious and the temptation to steal comes a little bit later, but it's a trap. At this point, some of you will already be asking why I would be making a scam awareness video with the intent of protecting or even warning dishonest people. Good question, and I will answer it later, and if you want to jump straight to that answer, here's the timestamp. But anyway, on with how this scam works. The victim of the scam uses the seed phrase to access and open the SafePal wallet, and lo and behold, they find that it contains a large value of cryptocurrency, usually one called USDT, a currency that is designed to maintain parity with the US dollar, and there's maybe $10,000 worth of it in the wallet. At this point, the victim is supposed to act out of avarice and decide to try to take this money for themselves. So they try to withdraw it, but they immediately hit a problem, and critically, it's problem 1 of 3. But also critically, problem 3 isn't evident yet, but we'll get back to that. Problem 1 is that a network fee is required in order to get the money out and send the currency somewhere else. Problem 2 is that this network fee can't be paid using a portion of the USDT value in the wallet. It needs to be paid with a different token called Tron or TRX, and unfortunately this wallet has none of that currency. No problem, reasons the scam victim, because the fee is only some small fraction of the potential profit, so they buy the required value of TRX and deposit it into the wallet. Now they should be able to pay the fee and make off with the $10,000 in there, right? Wrong. There's just one tiny snag, which is problem 3. The scammers have this wallet set up so that all transfers out require 2 independent authorizations. This is the electronic equivalent of a conventional paper check requiring the signature of 2 of the authorized account signatories to be valid. The victim of the scam doesn't have this dual authorization information, and so they cannot complete the theft of the 10,000 USDT, and they can't even claw back the TRX they deposited in there for the fee. The scammers also have some automation set up so that the TRX that the victim paid in is promptly transferred away to a different wallet, and now the trap is baited and ready for the next cycle. So yeah, this scam is specifically tailored to try to exploit people who are sufficiently opportunistic as to steal money from someone who appears to be acting naively in sharing their seed phrase. Or, I suppose if you wanted to be a little more generous, you could call it something a little bit like entrapment. Maybe it's meant to tempt or induce a curious
Honestly,
person
hold
to
on, what
steal
the?
who wouldn't normally.
I want to say, is this the crypto version of the Red Robin story? Stealing from the rich and giving to the poor, or is just like, or is it another basically scammer versus scammer type of thing? Probably scammer versus scammer.
Have thought of doing that. Either way, they deserve what they get, right? Well, okay, maybe that's one way to learn a lesson, but I think it's also possible to learn that crime doesn't pay without ever needing to commit the crime. And indeed, that's the method I would most heartily recommend. It's how most of us learn about right and wrong. At some point in my own life, I learned that there might be adverse consequences for doing wrong things, and I learned most of that without having to do all of those wrong things and then find out the adverse consequences firsthand and painfully. But thinking about the adverse consequences was part of my decision process. So this video exists partly for that purpose. It's information. If you're a person that would jump at the chance of swiping money off someone acting naively online, you could use the information in this video to inform yourself of the potential consequences of that kind of action and reflect on whether it might be simpler and better for you to just behave honestly and decently instead. But
Also,
there is
that is
also
the
another
best kind
reason
of
for making
trap.
this video. This is a tactic that scammers happen to be using at the moment for this specific purpose, to scam people who are prepared to be dishonest enough to steal. But there's no particular reason why this tactic or a variant of it mightn't turn up later as a facet of some other form of scam, where the victim might be the completely innocent target of some form of fraud, for example. I can actually think of some scenarios for that, but I won't go into further details, as I don't want to give anyone free ideas on how to scam people.
Yeah.
And perhaps the simplest reason for putting out this warning is that I don't think these scammers are the right people to be enforcing standards of lawfulness and decency. That is, if I made a list of all of the people and organisations that I trust, or at least that I recognise as holding a legitimate position to establish and enforce lawful and right behaviour, I'm certain that random crypto scammers would not be very high up on that list.
Yeah.
As a more general piece of information, I suppose the lesson or message here is that not everything is what it seems. This scam actually bears some resemblance to the advance fee scams that I've talked about a lot on this channel, where there's a requirement for the victim to part with money in order to supposedly gain money. Anytime you find yourself in that situation, it's important to stop and think very hard and question, is this really right? Maybe ask someone else if what is in front of you sounds right. Anyway, if you see comments like the one I showed here, it's definitely a scam, and all you need to do to avoid this scam is continue being the honest and decent person you already are. I would also recommend replying the above comment is a scam if you see it in a place where you don't yourself have the direct power to delete.
Yeah. Also, something I do with Twitch, Kick, and YouTube. Once I notice a new scam that's up, I actually put in parts of the scam comment as banned words or banned phrases, and also I put like potential variant that they would probably use as to block potential variants as well. Not only block this game from ever appearing on my channel, but also block any future revisions of this game. Of course, you can't block everything, but it's the effort that counts. All right. Let's see how long it's been. Oh, okay. And that's for like I can improve my shadows, but I don't know exactly how to, so I'll probably look that up. I'll probably look that up when I get the chance. No, fuck it. Let's look it up now. Or I could just stick with two-tone shadows. So if I do like this, brighten the shadow a little bit, then brush it back a bit. I kind of do rough shadows. Pardon. Do rough shadows all the time, so. So if I do that, that, I also want, of course, correct this shit as well. What the It kind of looks like a watercolor shadow. I think about it. Kind of looks like I actually did watercolor shadow. That's it. That's a pretty interesting concept. Having standard anime art style, except the shadows are watercolor. The shadowing is watercolor. It's pretty fun. Microsoft Word Windows. Let's see here.
Hello, guys and gals. Me, Mutahar, and
Here you go.
about a few days ago, I made a video about YouTube's insane comment bots, and this is actually a follow-up. YouTube actually did respond to this entire situation. And I kind of wanted to talk about it because, you know, things have kind of escalated a little bit. And it really feels that, you know, this is not some boilerplate nonsense response. Okay, I've been on YouTube for a long time. And, you know, very rarely do you get like specialized correspondence, right? Very rarely do you get like the contact from YouTube's team that isn't either like your video's been demonetized or your video's been hit with an age restriction. No, I ended up getting this important message from YouTube, their partner support. And they reached out to me on behalf of the community outreach team, okay? And they actually brought up that video, the YouTube comment bots are posting CP. Now, inside that, they also said that the video that I made got age restricted. And if you ever want to know what an age restriction does to a video, if the video is doing really well, as soon as you get age restricted, woo, gets hit right in the algorithm, doesn't exist, it effectively is smited. Now, I think the cynical part of me could probably sit here and say, YouTube shut down any criticism. Ooh, they're hiding stuff. Now, I get it. YouTube videos get age restricted, I guess, and, you know, I've kind of learned to accept them. Again, it just comes with the territory. Like I said, this isn't a job of mine, so, you know, whether the video does really well, which that video really did, it got about 500,000 views before it ended up getting age restricted, but let's say that it hadn't, I think it did its job, right? It raised enough awareness for people to not think that this was some under the rug joke. Now, for anybody that doesn't know, there's a problem with YouTube comment sections right now where as soon as a video gets uploaded, one of the top things that you'll see, like immediately, no matter who you really are, it feels like the first 1 to 200 comments that show up on a video are entirely posted by spam, by bots. And normally, I wouldn't make a video on this if the bots were just goofy and jokey, because sometimes you'll come into a video and it's like, oh my god, they'll post some stupid chain letter nonsense that you can laugh at, or they can just say, oh, this guy sucks, I'm better, yada 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 yada. But in the last, like, I would say a year almost, especially in the last few months, it feels like this entire situation is ramped up to an insane degree. Because a lot of the profiles and a lot of the communities that are now sharing this kind of stuff, it's not that they're, posting, slightly racist things or anything of that nature in the comment section. It's that sometimes you go to their profile pictures and it goes to Discord servers or off-platform links that take you to sites that are actually where some really illegal stuff happens. And it was worth making a video on because honestly, it's better to call this out now than have like some mainstream news service call this out down the road and effectively, put YouTube in a really, really rough spot, okay? It's better that the platform self-polices rather than, they don't do a thing and then eventually it becomes a big deal, down the road when, again, someone picks it up that's outside the scope of YouTube. And generally speaking, you should be speaking up and reporting about this stuff as much as you can, because letting it just sweep
Yeah.
under the rug is never healthy. It never really addresses the problem. Now, when I made that video, one thing that I have to kind of clarify is obviously even somebody on a Reddit came in and was like, are you doing anything illegal by going down these rabbit holes? And I have to just straight up say, in my entire career on YouTube, I have never, even accidentally come across, illegal material on the internet. Generally speaking, what you do is anytime you find something like, for instance, let's say that you're on, your search engine and this Wikipedia page for the word white, right? If you feel that this link contains something illegal, it's not impossible for you to copy that link address and immediately paste it into the FBI cyber tips tool or the relevant authority, okay? Generally speaking, you don't have to view anything illegal to report it. In fact, it's better you don't do that because you don't want to be, consuming any of this kind of content. You don't want to be saving it to your computer, God forbid, just for the purposes of uploading it for a report tool. You can just provide relevant law enforcement agencies or even like YouTube just a link, which is precisely what I did with this letter that they sent me. So anyways, when YouTube responded, they said that protecting minors is of the utmost importance to us. Our specialists are carefully reviewing the claims in your video and taking action accordingly. To which obviously I also reach out and am in the midst of providing them as much information as I can about anything that I talked about in that video. And to which YouTube's like, yes, we get it. You're dedicated to keeping the platform safe, as I think everyone is. Now to go back to the point, right? When you're covering stuff, you don't have to view anything illegal. Again, the whole concept is you just tell these people that this is the breadcrumb trail, this is where you go on to. Now in that video about a few days ago that I made, I talked about some entities that I still will not name in this video because it doesn't really help naming anything. A lot of the evidence that I saw that came out of it was just a cursory glance, looking at, a lot of these platforms and looking at the kind of posts that they would make. And anytime that they would show a post, they would have like a title of the post and then, the author and so on and so forth, like a standard Zen 4.0 forum page, right? And if somebody in a forum thread says that, they're posting something illegal, you don't have to click into the thread and possibly see something wrong. You should just be able to report it at that point in really good faith.
Yeah.
And looking more into the site's history, looking more into the people that were, looking into the platforms, the off-platform behavior, the off-platform sites that were linked to from these Discord servers and YouTube groups that were posting these comment bots, that off-platform site was also targeted by plenty of their hosters and constantly is a site that goes up and down just simply because of them not wanting to, I guess, remove any links to illegal material. It is generally one of the darker parts of the internet, and it's all done entirely in the clear web, right? It's one of the things, even with like dark web videos, like when I did dark web browsing pretty actively, there was a point where I just had to stop because, for me, finding interesting websites to show you was becoming an impossibility. And a lot of the places that I would source these websites from were link lists that would constantly be updated with new links that a search crawler on the dark web would find. Now, sometimes you'll come across an onion address, like for instance, this has library FY. sometimes you'll come across a name of a girl, right? Like I've come across names of, I don't know, let's just use a fake one for the sake of privacy and everything. Sarah, right? Let's say you come across Sarah blank 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 dot onion. There's a pretty good chance that clicking on it is going to send you to a website that's landing page consists of illegal material. And usually, if you're on the deep web and you look at that link and look at its name, it's a pretty good chance that 99% of it, you should avoid clicking on it to begin with, right? That's a one example that I can give you. Illegal content does exist on the deep web, and for the longest time, I have admitted to not browsing the deep web for weekly videos because sometimes all the content for that week or 2 weeks was really just cataloged to be illegal content. It's sort of the one thing, as this gains popularity and with the anonymity of it, people are going to be making web pages like this. This kind of content doesn't just exclusively exist on the deep web. You can find a lot of this content, unfortunately, on very common websites. You'll even be able to find it on Twitter, on Reddit, if left unmoderated. You'll be able to find it on Discord. You'll be able to find it on any social media network that allows random people to upload all the time, okay? So the fact that these websites exist, this is a truly negative section of the deep web, but they get taken off really quick. In fact, I'm actually going to be of understanding that there are people that work exclusively against these individuals. So law enforcement can come in pretty quick to deal with this kind of stuff. And in some cases, it may be likely that even law enforcement is running this to entrap individuals and to actually get them to commit illegal crimes or at least come forward so that they can arrest them. Basically a fucking honeypot at this point, if that makes sense. Disgusting website where the most illegal material is being openly shared. Now again, I'm just going to say for the record, I haven't opened up any of their image threads, but being that they're so brazenly talking about it, I have no reason not to believe that illegal stuff is being shared. But the fact that it's being done so openly and, they're just trying to get people to jump onto it. And, it'd be one thing if this was in the darkest corner of the internet. But the fact that these people are pipelining individuals on YouTube and other large social networks, that needs to stop. Now, I think that, there's a lot of cynicism that people have, like, oh, YouTube's just doing this to cover their ass, or YouTube's, demonetizing or age restricting a video to punish. And I don't really see the world that way. I think for a lot of these social media platforms like YouTube, like Instagram, like Facebook, like Twitter, they're actually just way too big for their own good. There's just a lot of people every single day, every single hour posting out-of-pocket shit. There's a lot of good content posted onto YouTube. There's a lot of funny stuff posted on here. There's a lot of informative stuff. But for everybody posting an informative and funny video, there's always a bad person. There's always a bad egg or a bad apple that's uploading hours of bad content onto the site. Okay, content that is obviously violating of the terms of service, content that may actually even be illegal. And sometimes, YouTube, their automated filters don't pick that kind of stuff up, or it's in like the very corner of the internet. But the reason for, again, talking about this is because when you have the chatbot problem, or not the chatbot problem, the comment bot problem, where, again, it's people immediately jumping into the most popular videos or a trending video on YouTube and trying to guide, anybody off platform, whether it be through a link in their profile pages or a link sneakily, placed into a comment bot, whether they use, specific Unicode style attacks to circumvent YouTube's automated AI like checking. These are all things that as soon as they're happening, like in a popular comment section, and the friction of accessing illegal stuff has basically been reduced down to a few clicks, that's when it's actually really, really scary. And ultimately, I'm glad that YouTube's kind of at least taken it a little bit seriously. They've actually responded to this. And, I will always do my part to assist YouTube as best as I can. Again, I always want to say when you're investigating this kind of stuff, you never want to go too deep into the rabbit hole. You just want to talk about this stuff from a, logical perspective. You want to report any link you can, report the names of any groups you can to law enforcement agencies, or specifically the platform like YouTube in this instance where you see it being offended. Because generally speaking, you don't want to ruin an investigation. You don't want to be the internet vigilante that ultimately ruins the entire case down the road for when these people eventually do get the feds showing up at their door to stop them. There's one thing that I've always kind of talked about. I brought this up years ago, but one of the interesting tools that you can use right now is actually this one Reddit place called r/traceanobject. And a great way to end this video off is basically showing you that there are entire communities you can join where, again, law enforcement agencies post these case files and images or hashes from like actual cases they're investigating. So they'll post things like, can you guys identify these logos on t-shirts? And again, they might be hard to tell, but it's an entire community who sits down, basically analyzes everything they can in truly autistic internet Redditor mystery mode. And once they are able to identify what these things are, law enforcement agencies effectively have leads to go off of. And if they have a legitimate lead, it's far more helpful than you trying to go into the weeds yourself and being the internet assist or internet vigilante. Which is one of the reasons why I guess making these kind of videos, or at least talking about this, is super duper important, at least to me. Because ultimately, I think the internet is filled with a lot of bad shit. And I think there's a lot of bad stuff now just openly happening. You know, it used to be like 5, 6 years ago, you would kind of have to go into the very dregs of the internet society to find some really bad stuff. But the fact that I think that there's entire communities that have gotten really brazen with this, communities that are so in the wrong that even some of the most, I guess you could say, rough communities on the internet like 4chan or any of these groups, you know, when they consider you to be a bad apple, you really are kind of a bad fucking apple. You know what I mean? You really are probably one of the worst people out there. But yeah, I think it was worth, like, it's good to see YouTube kind of respond to it, to take it a little bit seriously. And I'll take as many age restrictions as I guess I'm going to be handed on a silver platter. If it means that, and I hope, you know, a few months down the road, this level of insanely illegal, you know, comment bots on YouTube eventually, you know, face the axe. You know, if YouTube can see this problem, you know, a year from now and adjust their tools accordingly to stop this, I think I can consider that shit to be the biggest win, one of the biggest wins that I've ever seen on my YouTube channel career at all, okay? Because ultimately, look, I can handle a lot of stupid comment bots. Like, I can handle, you know, chain mails. I can handle even a little bit of racism towards me on this site. Like, it doesn't, that to me is just part of being on the internet. I can handle a little bit of raunchiness. But when I see the bots, okay, when I see a concerted effort being organized from people that are willingly just spreading some of the most illegal stuff around, I think at that point, not just as a creator, but I think as just somebody that's like an internet citizen, an internet person, probably should be speaking up against it. And it should definitely not be happening on like a tier 1 site like YouTube, where it is probably, I think, one of the most visited websites in the world. And if it's not, it's like the second visited website right after Google. Insane stuff. But I wanted to talk about it, give you a little update.
Yeah.
So yeah, ladies and gentlemen, this is me, Mutahar, and I'm out.
Yeah, I do, agree wholeheartedly with, Mudahar. Basically, if you can do something about it, then don't be a vigilante. Just report it to like Google's Google support page, YouTube support page, or report to the FBI. Use all the resources you can. Just don't be a vigilante and end up ruining a case and letting the perpetrator off scot-free. Basically what Mudar is saying. Anyways, I'm gonna end off the stream here, and hopefully everything goes well. Also the fact that what was it again? Fuck. Oh yeah, so I'm gonna try to use the resources that I can find to improve my art skills and all that, and as well as try to find as many games as I can find to play. I will have a back catalog of like VOD and Rage games, but that won't be until like I am like let's just say, fuck. Oh yeah, okay. So that just won't be until I'm in a place where I can just have soundproofing material all over the walls and just rage to my heart's content. Anywho, With that being said, I hope y'all have a good rest of your day, evening, and night time zone. And make sure you have something to eat and hydrate my blitzies. With that being said, I gotta get going now. So bye bye, matinee.